the Mays Business School Research Award. You have to have won the University's Association of Former Students Research Award. You have to have served as an editor or associate editor of a major journal in your discipline. You have to have also demonstrated significant contributions to the mentoring of junior faculty and PhD students. Those are the minimum requirements simply to be nominated. Once a person is nominated, their credentials are then screened first by the Mays Research Council. A recommendation is then given to the Mays to the Mays Executive Committee, and then finally they make a recommendation to the dean. So that's a substantial series of very challenging standards that one has to meet to get to this point. And certainly no one is more deserving of this recognition than Dr. Lynn Berry. His research record spans 45 years. His first major publication was in 1968. Lynn, I suspect that there are lots of people in the room that weren't born in 1968. I was actually a junior high school in 1968. But that is a testament to the amount of scholarship and the impact that Dr. Berry has had on his discipline. His research has been cited over 95,000 times. Not 95 times, not 950, 95,000 times, which again is a true indicator of the impact that he's had over the course of his career. And he's played a pioneering role in the establishment of 3 different research domains, something that most people don't accomplish one time in their career. He helped create and define the research domain known today as service marketing and service quality. He was a leader in the establishment of relationship marketing. And most recently, he's popularly known today for his work in the area of healthcare service. Truly, the magnitude and the breadth of his impact is beyond description. So it's my great honor and privilege to recognize Dr. Berry with the Mays Business School Lifetime Achievement Award for Scholarship and Research. Lynn?
Around 1980, Don Zale, then the CEO of Zale Corporation, approached 3 Texas universities with an offer. And the offer was that we, Zale, would like to give you some money for a 3-year period in the hopes that you'll use that money to do something, quote, in retailing. He went to the University of Texas, personally. He went to SMU, personally. And he came to Texas A&M, our business school, personally. And said, here's the money. I hope you'll use it to do something in retail. Business schools are ignoring retailing. UT took the money. SMU took the money. Texas A&M took the money. To this day, Don Zale will tell you he has no idea what SMU and UT did with the money. What they didn't do was anything in retail. But we did. And that gift led our leadership at the time to begin a discussion about retailing and incorporating it into our program. And that discussion led to my being hired here. So one foresighted CEO challenged 3 universities. One university took him up on the challenge. And here I am. And I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be getting this award for sure. I wouldn't be on the faculty had it not been for Donald Zale. Thank you, sir. You and Barbara are very dear friends. I wasn't here when he made that original gift, but I think he probably had a wink in his eye that suggested that if you actually do something, there may be more on the way. We did, and there was. And some years later, the Zale Foundation made a $1 million endowment gift to create the chair, the MB Zale Chair in Retailing and Marketing Leadership, which I hold, named after Don's father. And many other gifts to the Mays Business School also, important gifts. I've divided my remarks today into 3 parts. The first part is I'm going to take you through 7 turning points in my career. And this is where I'll take most of my time in presenting. And it was fun to do this. I prepared these remarks for today, a very special day in my life. And it was fun to look back and try to think, what was it that really were the turning points that changed the trajectory of my work, that made the most impact for me. The second section is I want to talk to you briefly about what it means to be a researcher and a writer. I'm going to address this issue briefly about research schools versus teaching schools. It's a very important topic. And finally, I'm going to talk to you about 3 brief lessons from my academic journey. We have some PhD students in the room, and so these lessons are particularly for them. So first, the turning points, and there's 7. In 1967, I faced Dr. Beatty's red pencil. Turning point number 1. The late Dr. Wayne Beatty was a business communications professor at Arizona State University when I was a doctoral student in the 1960s. He served on my dissertation committee, as he did many other doctoral committees, for the purpose of helping doctoral students improve their writing. At the time, I thought, I know how to write. I don't need Dr. Beatty. I was wrong. Dr. Beatty spent countless hours on the first draft of my dissertation. He shortened needlessly long sentences. He replaced inappropriate words. He wrote many explanatory notes and comments in the margins. My dissertation came back from him, my draft, a sea of red, which is where the red pencil comes in. On the first day, I was crestfallen. I'd worked really hard. I thought it was almost done. On the second day, I was angry. On the third day, I decided that Dr. Beatty was right. And on this day, the third day, I decided that I was going to become a good writer. Improving my writing skills has become a career-long journey because of one professor's investment in me many years ago. And one of the biggest thrills of my life, and there have been many, was in 1989 when I surprised Dr. Beatty. I just published a new book. I just had my first set of author copies arrive on my desk in my home. And I took one of those author copies and I put it in an overnight mail. He didn't know I was even writing a book. And I sent it to him. But I did one more thing. I dedicated the book to him with the words, "To Professor Wayne Beatty of Arizona State University, who more than 20 years ago inspired me to want to become a good writer." Dr. Beatty. Turning point number 2. It's 1972 now, and the ABA is on the phone. I'd completed my doctorate in 1968. I was at the University of Denver as an assistant professor. It was the early 70s then, and one day the phone rings. It was the American Bankers Association. I have no idea how they knew about me. I mean, I was a nobody, but they called me. Very few people called me in those days, but they called me. Very few people call me now. It's all email, as a matter of fact. It was the American Bankers Association on the phone, and they asked, would I be interested in teaming up with Professor Jim Donnelly from the University of Kentucky to write a book on bank marketing and to teach marketing to the banking industry. That industry was just beginning to discover marketing. I was interested. And I had not met Jim Donnelly, but I did, and we did it. We co-authored one of the very first bank marketing books ever published, called Marketing for Bankers. It was published by the American Bankers Association in 1975. And for the next several years, Jim and I traveled the country presenting marketing seminars to the banking industry. We eventually published 2 other books together. But most importantly, we developed a bond usually reserved for brothers, a bond that exists to this day, more than 40 years later. My friend Jim Donnelly and I talk on the telephone every single Sunday, and we have for 10 years. We never miss a Sunday, never. My work in financial services marketing in the 1970s paved the way for what was to come. Because when I was in the PhD program at Arizona State in the 60s, the field of services marketing did not exist. Not one time did a professor of mine ever utter the words services marketing. And it did not occur to me when I was a doctoral student, it did not occur to me that until I started studying financial services marketing after completing my doctorate, that services requires different ideas than marketing manufactured goods. When I was a doctoral student, marketing was marketing was marketing. Whether it was an intangible performance or it was a can of soup. We learned how to market cans of soup. But when I got out in the field and started interacting with bankers, with my friend Jim, then I began to realize that we needed to create a new part of marketing, a new subdiscipline. By the late 1970s, with the urging of my French colleague, the late Eric Lingard, I started to envision the opportunity for my research to broaden from financial services marketing to just services marketing. There was a very important article that was written in 1977. It was the very first article written on services marketing in our journal, the Journal of Marketing, called Breaking Free from Product Marketing. It was written by Lynn Shostak. And that article, too, had a great influence on me, that I needed to broaden my focus from an industry focus to the whole thing. I published my first pure services marketing paper in 1980. It was entitled simply, Services Marketing is Different. And then there was another influence in the mid-70s that eventually led to my broadening my focus, which is turning point number 3. 1974 and beyond, turning point number 3, learning from Mr. Retailing. Stanley Marcus's book, published in 1974, called Minding the Store, the story of Neiman Marcus, had an enormous influence on me, more so than almost any book I've read in my career. I was fascinated by this compelling anecdote-filled story of a store that served customers with grace and with style and with imagination. I was fascinated. And I was fascinated with the story of the man behind the scenes, Stanley Marcus himself. A brilliant merchant, a bold marketer who transformed Dallas, a dusty old town, into a fashion mecca, almost single-handedly. When I moved to Texas A&M in 1982, one of my personal goals was to meet Stanley Marcus in person, because he lived in Dallas at the time. He has since passed away, but he lived in Dallas then. And over the years, we became good friends. We traveled together occasionally for speaking engagements. What a thrill that was. We traveled together to visit innovative stores. I'd call him up. I said, there's this great store in Ohio. Do you want to go? He said, yes. And then I'd call another. I was on a board then where the CEO owned a plane. So I'd call the CEO and say, you want to go with Stanley Marcus and me to see this great store in Akron, Ohio, if you will fly us there in your plane. It was Stanley Marcus, not me, that he wanted to spend some time with. Stanley Marcus was one of the wisest people I've ever known, ever. I never took a class from him, but I consider him one of my greatest teachers. Mr. Retailing. Turning point number 4 was 1982, and that was coming to Aggieland. My work in financial services marketing had prepared me for the services researcher and teacher I was to become here at Texas A&M. It was the foundation for my work ahead. By 1980, I knew that services marketing would be the core of my life's work. In 1980, I knew that. I had found my academic reason for being. And in 1982, I found the perfect academic home at Texas A&M for pursuing this work. Welcoming to the university and to the marketing department were my collaborators to be, Parsu Parasuraman and Valerie Zeitham. Valerie and Parsu and I became services marketing soulmates. We connected with the Marketing Science Institute, better known as MSI, which funded our initial exploratory research in service quality. That initial program, probably the first formal service quality research done in this country at least. That initial program led to service quality research over a period of 10 years in 5 different research phases, which at the time was the longest running MSI research sponsorship. May still be, I don't know, but it was then. We're so fortunate to find this partner in the MSI. It's a jewel of an organization that brings academic researchers and executives together and puts them in the same room to talk about important problems that need more research. Academic researchers like myself who work closely with MSI learn to never, never underestimate the intellectual capacity of business executives. Just as Valerie and Parsu and I were fortunate to work with MSI, I was fortunate to work with them, with Valerie and Parsu. I'm a better researcher, I'm a better person because of my friendship and association with them. Our long and fruitful collaboration illustrates just how important it is to team up with the right people in your research endeavors. We all had and have similar values. We each have a very strong work ethic. We each have a strong love for services marketing. And we brought complementary skills to our team, so we taught each other a lot. We all had different core competencies. Time permits just one story, and it concerns Parsu before we move on. It's a Friday night, it's very late at night, it's 1990, and Parsu and I are in Rochester, New York. It was nearly 10 o'clock in the evening. We just finished 2 back-to-back customer focus groups. For the particular company we were studying that day in Rochester for our research program in service quality. It's almost 10 o'clock. We were very tired. We were very hungry. We were staying in a Holiday Inn on the budget. Dean. We were staying in the Holiday Inn, and the restaurant was about to close, but it was still open, thank God. I don't think the staff was happy to see us. In fact, we were the only people in the restaurant along with one cook and one waitress. So why am I telling you the story? Because Parsu and I had one of the most important conversations we've ever had that night. I asked him at dinner, why are we here? Why are we in a Holiday Inn restaurant in Rochester, New York at 10 o'clock at night on a Friday evening? Why? Why aren't we home with our families? And we discussed that. And we concluded that we were on an important mission with our colleague Valerie, who made many of the road trips but wasn't there on that. On an important mission to create new knowledge, to improve organizations, and to improve service in our country. We were in Rochester, not Minnesota, that's coming. Rochester, New York, at 10 o'clock at night on a Friday night, away from our homes, asking ourselves why we're here, and we decided we were there because the data were there. We were in Rochester, New York, because the data were in Rochester, New York. And we're researchers, and we believe in what we're doing, and we think it's important. And I'll never forget that conversation, neither will Parsu. We talk about it all the time now. Turning point number 5. 2001, 2002, climbing a new mountain at the other Rochester Mayo Clinic. My career-long commitment to studying service prepared me well for the most powerful learning experience of my entire career, which was my sabbatical leave study at the Mayo Clinic in both Rochester, Minnesota, and in their newer campus in Arizona, Scottsdale, Arizona. I did that study during the 2001-2002 academic year on faculty development leave. These sabbaticals are such rich opportunities. And when you get one, you can't blow it. You got to find a new mountain to climb. That's what they're for. And my new mountain, I decided after a lot of study, was healthcare. I'd been a service researcher my entire career, but I knew very little about healthcare, one of our most important services. And it was time to learn. So I went to Mayo Clinic, and with a colleague, I interviewed about 1,000 Mayo Clinic patients and physicians and nurses and allied health staff, administrators and others, about 1,000 people. But equally significant to the interviews were the observations. I went into the OR, supposed to go once. Nancy told me, don't faint. I didn't faint. I was fascinated. And so I just kept going back and going back. I saw a lot of big surgeries. By the time I was done with Mayo Clinic, I was ready to scrub in, and it didn't look that hard. You know? They said, no, we like you, but no. But I was right there at the table. I was as close to the patient as the end of this podium. And I observed patient-doctor interactions hundreds and hundreds of times at the Mayo Clinic. I went into the examination rooms to observe. I went into the hospital patient rooms to observe and took copious notes. I even stayed in the hospital as a mystery patient. Couldn't wait to get out. But I did stay in the hospital, took lots of notes, had lots of tests. When you're my age and you're at the Mayo Clinic, you might as well get the workup. And I did. I flew on the emergency rescue helicopter They don't even let Mayo Clinic people do that, but somehow they let me. They were wonderful to me. What an experience for a service quality researcher, just that one day, that Sunday, to be in a room with the emergency rescue team with a helicopter outside waiting for the call. And when that call comes, to see the precision, the service precision for that crew to be in the air in 5 minutes. And then to land on a highway in an accident site and to take complete charge. And depending upon where that accident occurred, to have the most critically injured patient on the helicopter and back in the Rochester hospital emergency room within minutes. I mean, if you're going to be a service quality researcher, I saw service quality that day. What a thrill. I became hooked on healthcare at the Mayo Clinic. I mean, absolutely, absolutely, positively, completely hooked. I lived in a one-bedroom apartment in Minnesota and Arizona. I had very few material possessions with me. I loved being at the Mayo Clinic. None of that other stuff mattered. I missed my wife and my family. You came for some long weekends. Thank you for that. And I've thought long about what happened to me at the Mayo Clinic because it changed my life in many ways. Personally as well as professionally, for sure. And I decided that at Mayo I was learning something very different, very exciting, and very important. And I felt that I could merge my life's work in services marketing and service quality with my new interest in healthcare, and I could build a bridge. And if I could learn enough, I could use my past work to help inform my future work. I was ready for a new mountain to climb, and I found it in healthcare. It's a very big mountain and a very tough one. And I have a long way to go. But I've been on that mountain for 15 years now. And what a journey. What an adventure. My re-entry from Mayo Clinic back here was hard. I didn't expect it to be hard. It was very hard. And I struggled. For at least 9 months I struggled once I was back. Because I'd made this big investment to go to Mayo Clinic, to be away from my family. And I was so excited. But I got back to Texas A&M, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know the medical journals. I didn't know the culture of publishing in medical journals. You know, I just felt like such a rookie. When I left from Mayo Clinic, I felt very confident in what I was doing. I felt very efficient and productive in my work. When I came back, I was the opposite. I was a mess. And yet I had made this big investment, and I didn't know what to do. Didn't know how to do it. And more than once, I wondered if I was on a fool's errand, that healthcare was just too complicated. And maybe I was on the wrong mountain. But those moments were fleeting. And I pumped myself up, and I persisted. And eventually, I improved my confidence. I did realize that if I was going to make a contribution to the healthcare literature, I had to fully exploit my knowledge of business and services. I had to make that bridge. Otherwise, I simply could not compete for medical journal space with medical doctors and with PhDs in healthcare fields. I simply couldn't. That journal, Real Estate, is very precious, and I'm a rookie and they're not. But what I could do is write about stuff that I did know and apply it to healthcare. And so that's what I started to do. And I formulated a research plan and made a commitment myself that every research project from that point on would meet 3 tests. It would have to have the potential for improving the patient's service experience. It would have to have the potential for improving the patient's health. And it would have to have the potential for reducing waste in healthcare, which is rampant. Oh my gosh. You put a business school professor like me into all the different healthcare institutions I've visited over the last 15 years, and you see so much waste, so much inefficiency. You know. So I'm very interested in that issue. In October of 2003, about 1.5 years after I returned from Mayo Clinic, I published my first medical journal article. I partnered with a medical doctor, and I partnered with my former student and my close friend and frequent collaborator, Kathleen Siders, who's a professor at Boston College. And together we published the article titled Innovations in Access to Care, a Patient-Centered Approach. We published it in the Annals of Internal Medicine, a top 5 medical journal in the world. We worked very hard, and we got some blessed TLC from an editor who got our first submission, who said, there's an idea here, but these people need help. Thank God, because editors sometimes just send back a little terse note that basically says, forget it. But multiple revisions later, that article came out. We did it. And then I knew I wasn't on a fool's errand. I could do it again. And I have. I've also had my share of rejections. That's part of the work that we do when we sign up for academic. But when you get the rejection, you learn from it, and you rewrite it. And I have a rejection story coming later. And then you pray and send it someplace else. Turning point number 6, 2011. I've done a lot between returning from Mayo Clinic and 2011. Conducted a number of healthcare studies, went into the field a number of times. During that period, I wrote my book about my research at Mayo Clinic called Management Lessons from Mayo Clinic. That was published in 2008. So I was busy. But in 2011, I was ready to go in the field again for a big study, a big one. And I was considering going to visit, I'd visited Mayo, another one of the brand name healthcare institutions, and made some preliminary contacts to study there. We have some really incredible healthcare organizations in this country. Mayo Clinic is one, but not the only one. But before I made the decision, I called my friend, Maureen Bisonano, who is the CEO of IHI. IHI is the Institute for Healthcare Improvement. It's based in Cambridge, and it's the most influential healthcare quality improvement group in the world. And Maureen, the CEO, is a friend of mine, a supporter of mine, a mentor of mine. And I told her what I wanted to do and my goals and where I was thinking about going, and she said, all the places you're thinking about would be great, and I'll pave the way, I'll make the introductions if you'd like. But before you decide on that, I have another idea. I said, what's that? And she said, you should go to Wisconsin. And I think I said something like, what? Wisconsin? In the winter? Really? Why? Some kind of response like that. And she said, we're working with 3 medium-sized health systems in Wisconsin, 3 different cities, that have the highest quality healthcare in the whole country and the lowest cost. there's a story in Wisconsin, Lynn. You should go to Wisconsin and figure it out because we're trying to figure it out ourselves. What's going on in Wisconsin? As soon as she said that, I was hooked again, and I went to Wisconsin in 2011. I was there for 4 months. I did basically 4 weeks of study at 3 institutions separately. So I started in La Crosse, Wisconsin at Gunderson Health System. La Crosse is a community of 50,000 people. Then I went to Appleton, Wisconsin, studied at Theta Care, a community of 100,000 people. And then I went to Green Bay. I was in Green Bay in December. Everybody wears these football jerseys. These green football jerseys in December in Green. I don't know why, but they do. Every person you see have the Packers jerseys. Yeah, so I had to get one too. Wisconsin was fabulous. I loved it there. Because what I had in these month-long visits to each of these 3 institutions, what I had there was I had independent, nonprofit, multi-specialty community health systems in mid-sized communities delivering the best care at the lowest cost in the entire country. Bellin Health last year, in Consumer Reports magazine, Bellin Health was rated by Consumer Reports magazine, the single safest hospital in America, in Green Bay. So I wanted to figure out the story. So here I was, in this case, living in residence inns. I have a lot of Marriott points. If anybody needs Marriott points, see me after the speech. I have a lot of Marriott points. When you live there for months at a time, you get a lot of points. And they took good care of me. They felt so sorry for me. This poor guy. He's all alone here. And he doesn't seem to want to leave. At Theta Care, I learned about the application of the Toyota manufacturing production system called Lean, applied to healthcare. At Gunderson, I learned about care coordination for the sickest of patients, and I learned about end-of-life care. They do it better than anyone. At Bellin, I learned about improving access to medical service. But something else happened to me. All of that was very, very meaningful and led to papers and so forth. But something else happened in Wisconsin that leads to my last turning point. And that is at both Bellin and Gunderson, I studied cancer service for the first time. I studied it. I did deep dives in their cancer centers. And the wonderful work they were doing with cancer patients and their families inspired me. And I'm asking, why can't we do this all over the country? If they're doing this in a town of 50,000 people, why can't we do this everywhere? Here and abroad. So the seeds were planted for my final turning point, which brings you up to the present, 2014 through today and beyond. Turning point number 7, ascending to ascending to the toughest stretch of the mountain I've been on for 15 years that I've ever been on, and that's cancer. And I did it at the IHI. That's where I started this journey. IHI, the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, they have a program called Senior Fellowship. They take It's a competitive program. They take one person a year to be a senior fellow. It's a lifetime appointment. So I am currently a senior fellow, and I will be for the rest of my career at the Institute of Healthcare Improvement. And I'll go back and forth as my schedule permits. I'm going back in a couple of weeks for a week. But I applied for the fellowship. It's a research fellowship, so you submit a research proposal. And my research proposal was to study cancer service. Specifically to raise the question, how can we improve the service experience of cancer patients and their families from diagnosis onward? How can we ease the path from the moment a patient and a family member hears the word cancer from a doctor onward? Through treatment, through survivorship, and if cancer is the cause, through end of life. How can we ease the path is my research problem. In July 2014, I moved again, this time to Cambridge, Massachusetts, where IHI is. It's right on the Harvard campus. It's independent of Harvard, but it's right on the campus. And I lived there on another faculty development leave. Thank you, Dean. I lived there for 7 months. I wasn't in residency in this time. Nancy found me, the mayor found me an apartment that was suitable. Very expensive apartment, but none of the others, and you know, Cambridge, Boston, yeah, you know. Anyway, I could not have done the research I'm doing had I stayed here. I had to be there for 2 reasons. One, the knowledge power that's there. Some of the most knowledgeable healthcare minds in the world are on the staff of IHI, and they come through the IHI as visitors every week. And the IHI staff really helped me inform my study, design my study. And I interviewed a number of them for my study. The other reason is that IHI opened doors that could not have been opened otherwise. Cancer is such a sensitive issue. It's really sensitive. And to let an outsider come into your cancer center to study is a very difficult transaction to make. And the fact that I had IHI senior people making introductions to me, for me, the fact that I had an IHI email address to like people, ask them if they'd participate in my study, made all the difference in the world. I've made a lot of progress. I'm well underway. I've virtually completed all my data collection in 2 phases. I started with key informant interviews to understand the service issues, opportunities, the problems. Interviewed about 62 people, patients, family members, oncologists, surgeons, oncology nurses, administrators, and others. And kept interviewing until I started getting the same answers again and again and again. There's several people in this room that I interviewed who've had cancer in their family. And I love them for participating in such a sensitive conversation with me. And when I was done with the 62 interviews, I had a good handle on the problems, and it's a long list. Then I started doing the site visits to different cancer centers, and I've been to 10 now. 3-day site visits, a lot more interviews, but also a lot of observation as well. Interviews with patients, family members, oncologists, surgeons, nurses, others. And then I've spent this past spring analyzing my data. All my interviews, I've done, I haven't counted, so I'm estimating, but I've personally done over 350 personal interviews now. And the second phase, the site visit, the purpose there, I knew the problems. The purpose there was to go to some very innovative cancer centers and start working on the solutions. And my job is to piece the best ideas from every different place and put them together in a cohesive framework. And I'm working on that now. I'm presenting the research publicly for the first time next week at MD Anderson. 2 important talks in my life in the same week, today and next week. And my first article from the research is going to be published this summer, with more, I hope, on the way. I'm going to be in this stretch of the mountain for a long time, perhaps the rest of my career. It's a very tough, complex area, but what an opportunity I have. With my background as a lifelong advocate for the consumer, as a champion for the consumer, for doing right by the consumer, to now be in the middle of all of this, where the consumer, the patient, is at the most vulnerable state of his or her life. Cancer isn't just a physical crisis. Cancer is an emotional crisis for the patient and for the family. And the emotional part of the crisis, the physical part might be resolved. The emotional part, I've interviewed enough cancer patients now to say this with authority, the emotional part never resolves. When you get cancer, you have cancer for the rest of your life emotionally. And we can do so much better. And we will. And I'm no longer a rookie. Yeah, I can do good. I feel it in my bones. So those are the turning points, and that by far is the longest portion of my remarks. But I have 2 brief sections I'd like to close with. Part 2 is why I write. Research and writing are hard work. I have many colleagues in this room that do that for a living as I do, and they know exactly what I mean. It's very hard work. I've been tenured for a long time. So why not rest on my laurels? Well, number one, that's not me. But there's more to the story than that. Why am I still going 100 miles an hour? Why did I just spend 7 months away from my wife, the mayor, although she's pretty busy. I have to sometimes make appointments to have dinner with my wife. There's 3 reasons why I write, why I do research. Number 1, writing and the research that comes before the writing accelerates and it broadens and it deepens our own personal development. We write to grow. The discipline of writing forces a deeper reflection and more rigorous thinking than almost any other activity imaginable. We can get by with fuzzy thinking more easily with a spoken word than we can with a written word. When we write, we not only teach others, we teach ourselves. In my own writing, so often I'm staring at something I've written, and then I ask myself, is that all you got? Is that it? It's happened many, many times in my career, and it'll happen many times in the future. Come on, man, dig deeper. You can do better. And I do. And very often, I can come up with something better, sometimes much better. Wow, I didn't know I knew that. Well, I didn't until I started digging deeper, working harder. I'm a much better classroom teacher than I ever would have been because I'm a researcher and writer. And those who criticize the universities, particularly universities like ours that are considered research universities, are wrong. We have many faults, but that criticism is wrong. I bring my research into my classroom virtually every day. And I have a sense of excitement about sharing that research with my students that I wouldn't have, I don't think. Not at that level, if I wasn't an active researcher and writer. We have great teachers in the Mays Business School. We have great teachers at Texas A&M University. I've served on some university-wide committees to select teaching awards. They blow your mind. You look at these dossiers of these people. It's just unbelievable, the talent we have in this campus. So that's part two, number one, why I write. Part two, number two, why I write is research and writing and publishing enables me to contribute my thoughts, my ideas, my research conclusions more broadly and more durably. Writing and publishing enables me to reach beyond my classroom. It enables me to reach beyond the shores of our nation. It enables a much bigger audience if you have something to share it with. In addition, publishing your work is enduring. It's enduring. The written word is more likely to endure than the spoken word. Readers keep the good stuff they read. We mark it up, we use a highlighter, we read it again. I've reread Stanley Marcus's Minding the Store book at least 3 times. So writing and publishing increases the reach of the work, and it increases the durability of the work. And then there's a third reason I write. The process of writing can be enormously satisfying. Creating something from scratch, in effect, creating a product from your mind. Creating something that may just turn out to be beautiful is truly joyful for me. Now, like all writers, I have good days and bad days, and the bad days are not joyful at all. I've spent many hours without a single word being written in a blank page. But on a good day, it's wonderful. And I'll just stay with it until nature forces me to get up from my desk, sometimes for hours. When the words are flowing, you just stay there, and it's joyful. And that's why I write, those 3 reasons. Tenure doesn't stop us from writing. It's just the start. Part 3, very briefly, and then I'll close. 3 lessons from my academic life, and as a marketing professor, I like to call these lessons the 3 Ps. Yeah, it's an inside marketing joke. We have 4 P, and never mind. P number 1, find your passion. As researchers, we need to find our reason for being, our passion. You need a fire in your belly to do good work, to keep going, to persevere through the rejections. I want to tell you briefly the Dumas Malone story. At age 51 in 1943, Dumas Malone quit his job as director of the Harvard University Press and settled on a farm in Charlottesville, Virginia, and started his task of writing a comprehensive biography of Thomas Jefferson. He finished the first volume in 1948, the second in 1951, the third in 1962, when at the age of 70 he finally retired from teaching, the fourth in 1970, the fifth in 1974, for which he received the Pulitzer Prize, and the final volume in 1981. By then, in 1981, he was 90 and nearly blind. In quoting Dumas Malone, he wrote, "In your early years, you're not sure what you want to do. You like a lot of things, and the question is, what do you like the most? I'd always intended to do this thing on Jefferson," in other words, write the comprehensive biography. "I'd always intended to do this thing on Jefferson, but it wasn't clear in my mind, as it was later, that I'd rather do it than anything else." You just don't know those kinds of things when you're young. You flounder around quite a bit. End of quote. In 1982, Dumas Malone was given the Phi Beta Kappa Award for Distinguished Service to the Humanities, a proper tribute to a man who knew what he would rather do than anything else. Find your passion. Last year, with one of my MBA students turned in her paper, when I returned the papers to the students, graded papers, I asked her if I could share with the students the quote that she put on the title page of her paper. It was a 3-sentence quote from the Indian poet Tagore. And here is that poem. "I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and saw that life was service. I acted and behold, service was joy." I love that. Yeah. Second lesson, number 2, is work on important problems. As I said, the research and the writing is such hard work, we might as well work on important problems instead of unimportant ones, on big issues instead of small ones. There was a time back, years ago, it was a really tough day for me. I believe I'd just been rejected on something that was important to me. I was feeling sorry for myself, I was down, I was depressed. And I took out a little slip of paper and I wrote a personal mission. And I stuck that piece of paper in my wallet. It's in my wallet right now. It's tattered and bruised. It's still there. And there's just 2 parts. But it's really helped me in my work, especially on the tough days, which we all have, regardless of the kind of work we do. My personal mission is inspire others to reach higher. Inspire others to reach higher. Contribute to the quality of life through better service and practice. And then the third, final lesson is persistence. Be persistent. On my computer monitor at home, I have a Post-it note, and it has one word on it. It's at the bottom of my monitor. And the word is perseverance. And I got that word from my dear friend and colleague, Rajan, who was our department head for 15 years. He and I came to Texas A&M the same year. We're very, very close. And he's always talking about perseverance. Stay the course. Get up and fight back. And I wrote that word down, I put it on a yellow Post-it, and I look at that word every day when I'm working in my home office. It's got me through a lot of things. Yeah. Rajan would say, get up, Lynn. Get up and keep going. So I'm going to use a prop here and tell a little story on me and my wife, and then I have just one closing comment. This is an issue of the Harvard Business Review from April 2001. I had submitted an article to the Harvard Business Review on the service cornerstones of retailing. I wrote the article because I felt retailers were losing their way. They were losing the foundation, the fundamentals that are critical to sustain success in retailing. And it was time, with the internet boom and everything, it was time to remind retailers of what was really important. So I worked very hard, Harvard Business Review, very hard on my article, and I sent it in and eventually heard back and they rejected it. I thought it was really good. So I did something I'd only done one other time in my entire career. I sent it back to the editor, who I had known from previous articles I'd published there, and said, would you mind having another editor look at it as a referee? Would you be willing to do that before you reach a final decision? She wrote me back a very nice note. She said, sure, we're happy to do that. And she did. And a month went by, and then it got rejected again. And it was something about, very nice, beautifully written, with prose like that. But there's just not enough. And I think the phrase was, we need rocket science for Harvard Business Review. We need something compelling and new for Harvard Business Review. And this is just a review of the basics, which, yeah, that's exactly what it was. No rocket science. So then, okay, they said no twice. So then I decided to revise it for my second journal. We always, in our line of business, we have a second choice in mind if we need it, which we often do. But the second journal had a lower word count. It had a lower word count. And so I had to cut out about 2,000 words. And also had a chance to reflect and use some of the feedback from Harvard Business Review in rewriting it for my next submission to a new journal. And I finally had it ready to submit to the new journal. And I really liked it then. It was better. It got better the third time around. Sometimes less is more. So I was talking to Nancy about it. I told her, gee, I wish I had submitted this version to the Harvard Business Review. So the mayor, she wasn't mayor then, the mayor says in her infinite wisdom, I thought it's 3 strikes and you're out. This is not in publishing. I said, well, if you like it so much, send it back to them again. The worst thing they can do is say no. And then she might have said, they probably will, but send it back to them again. What's the harm? You've worked so hard on it. And Glenda, you remember this story. So I did. I've never done that in my career. Send a twice rejected article back for the third time. So I sent it back, waiting for a quick email back saying, we've done it twice, Professor Berry. It's time to look for another home for your article. But the fact is, I didn't get any response for months. I was so embarrassed. I was humiliated that I had committed such an unpardonable act that they weren't even going to send me back a note to say no. So I was in Venezuela. I remember this day very well, and I'm just back from Venezuela. I had a couple-day trip there with Nancy for a speech, and I came to my office, and Glenda was in my office at my computer when I walked in. She says, "You got a voicemail, you need to listen to it." I said, "What is it?" She says, "No, you need to listen to it." This is maybe 3 months, 2 or 3 months after I submitted the third version. And on the voicemail was the editor of Harvard Business Review, literally screaming in the phone with joy. "Your article is accepted. Your article is accepted." Oh my God. It's in this issue. They come up with their own titles, and the title is The Old Pillars of the New Retailing. The Old Pillars of the New Retailing. So my 3 lessons: find your passion for an important problem and persevere. In closing, one final story. It was the late 1990s. I was not sure I was prepared to make the 2-year investment that would be required to research and write a new book on sustainable service, a book that I'd been discussing with my editor at the Free Press, Robert Wallace. So every book I had been done to that time, it was always a 2-year commitment. I wasn't sure I was ready for another 2-year deal. But then something wonderful happened to me. I read a magazine story written by Peter Drucker about 7 influential personal experiences in his life. One of his experiences was hearing the opera Falstaff, the last opera written by the 19th century Italian composer Verdi. Drucker described how he was overwhelmed by the opera, and he later learned that Verdi wrote this opera when he was 80 years old. To Drucker, Verdi undertaking such a demanding project at the age of 80 was incredible. And Drucker then read Verdi's explanation of why he did it. Verdi wrote, "All my life as a musician, I've striven for perfection. It has always eluded me. I surely had an obligation to make one more try." End of quote. Drucker resolved that Verdi's words would be his lodestar. I surely had an obligation to make one more try. Drucker's story about Verdi had a tremendous impact on me. I read that story literally. And I picked up the telephone and I called my editor at the Free Press, my publisher, and told him I'm going to write the book. And I did. And 2 years later, 2 years, my book, Discovering the Soul of Service, was published. I, too, wanted to keep trying to get it right. To all of you who came today, thank you so much for sharing this special day with me and my family. And to my peers in the Mays Business School, I thank you very much for this award, for which I will treasure it the rest of my life.